Hi, I'm Villain Fury and welcome to the video. Today I'm talking all about Magik. Magik is one of the two new heroes coming in the Age of Apocalypse box, as you know, previewed recently by Fantasy Flight Games, and she looks really good. So in this video, I'm going to try and analyze her, break her down, look at what kind of aspect cards she'll like, deck builds, how she'll play, and at the end try and rank her, in terms of power. But that's just a prediction for fun. I haven't played her, and more importantly, this time around, we don't know many of her cards, and if I don't know what kind of cards she comes with, it's very hard to make a prediction. So take everything I say with a big pinch of salt here, but I will say she is good. Mutant, Mystic, and X-Men, all those traits on one character is mind-blowing. So her recovery, hand size, hit points, all very standard, free recovery, 10 hit points, whatever. It is her hero ability that really sets her apart. Play with the top card of your deck face up, and once per phase, you may play the top card of your deck as if it were, in your hand, and get a -1 to its resource cost. This is stupid good. If you like powerful characters, you're going to really like Magik. And if you like Mystics, you're going to really like Magik. If you like X-Men, you're going to really like Magik. And if you like Domino, moving cards about, you're going to really like Magik. And I think all those things are generally quite popular to varying degrees. So I think Magik is going to be a kind of a fan favorite maybe, but we'll see. We'll see how that all shakes out. So the Alter Ego ability is to, when you change from Alter Ego to Hero form, search your discard pile for a spell, put it on top of your deck. Now, this will mean that when you're then in hero form, you can play it with that hero ability from the top of your deck for -1, which is a pretty nice little combo, especially when we look at some of the spell cards very shortly. Now, what's interesting here is that she's the sister of Colossus. Colossus also has one forwarding and also has an interrupt, when he goes to hero form from Alter Ego, he gets some kind of benefit. So I wonder if they're going to parody his design a little bit, and maybe she'll have some kind of card that lets her go from Alter Ego to hero form when the villain does something specific. Now, her hero side is just really good. That one forwarding, not so hot. The other stats, fine. But I cannot get over playing with the top card of your deck face up. The player card from the top of your deck once per phase thing, with a 1 discount, is just, I still can't get over it. Basically, if you can play something from the top of your deck in both phases, which does mean one of them would have to, line up right, be a card you can play in the villain phase. But it's basically +2 cards, plus, -2 resource cost across the whole round, which is extremely good. It's kind of like 2 Heady Carries and 2 Avengers Mansions. Not exactly, but also not exactly. It's kind of close if you can set things up right, and she does have ways to set things up. So we can see that basically cards from 8 to 15 aren't really known. Now, 8 is technically probably known. It's going to be Stepping Disc. We know she has multiple of them due to the phrasing on the card and the article itself, but we don't know if she has 2 Stepping Discs, 3, or even maybe 4 of them, like, Scarlet, which has 4 Hex Bolts. So let's talk about her Alter Ego Interrupt a bit more. So she has a card called Scrying, which is a spell, and then in her precon, she has a basic spell called Basic Spell. Uh, is what it is. Now, these are both really interesting cards. Now, Scrying is 0 cost. If you swap it on top of your deck going to hero form, you then cannot benefit from the -1 discount because you cannot discount anything from 0 in this game. But it is a good card. It lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck. It's kind of like Tony Stark's Futurist a bit. You get to draw one of those cards, so it kind of replaces itself. You get to discard one, and you put one back on top of your deck. So it's giving you a lot of control, and after you've used it, you then can have a card on top of your deck that you then would want to play. So I think the move will be, if Scrying is the only card in your discard pile, or maybe the card you want for whatever reason, you use your Alter Ego ability when changing to hero form to put it there. Then you use some kind of card draw, maybe an Avengers Mansion or anything like that, to put it into your hand. And then you can use it to set up another card there that you want, and then use your hero ability to play it. But a really cool card with a lot of cool choices, so I really like Scrying. Basic Spell is really interesting too. Now, it's 2 cost, and you're only getting 3 of, healing or damage or something. Its cost to output ratio is quite low. The forwarding is the best outcome, but even then, the forwarding is not perfect, but still good. However, because you can put it on top of your deck, it's cheaper, but more importantly, you can put it in top, on your deck from your discard pile. What that means is, because it's so versatile, you can have that versatility at hand whenever you swap down. So whatever problem comes up, you can kind of find a solution with Basic Spell. And I think that versatility is its biggest strength. Outside of, Magik, I don't know if this will see much play in the other Mystics. I don't know if it'll be in every one of Magik's decks, but, putting it in a deck for Magik, I've come around a bit on this since my first impressions. Basic Spell is pretty cool just for, what it can do. And yeah, hitting an identity has some interesting uses as well. It's quite rare to get access to in hero form. So the other spells we have are already in the game. She will probably come with more of her own, but again, we don't know many of her cards. These cards that are in the game are all phenomenal. They're all, if any character could take these and use these, not just mystics, everyone would. Summoning spell, if you spend, you spend 2 cost on summoning spell, discard until you get like a, I don't know, a 4 or 5 or 6 cost ally, the profit is enormous. And if that's in her discard pile and she goes from alter ego to hero, she can just put it back on top of her deck and do it again. That is stupid. All these cards are good for her though, and spiritual meditation, yeah, just moving through your deck and it's just really, really strong. And even if these are not on top of your deck from your alter ego ability or by chance they're in your hand, all of these cards do is they discard to some extent. So if you want to use your hero ability to play a card from the top of your deck, but you do not like what is on top of your deck, after you've played these cards and discarded some from the top of your deck, you'll have a different card there to play. And there's a lot of effects like that which will make you, discard from the top or search and then shuffle your deck that can be used to kind of re-roll your bonus card, which is stupidly good, honestly. Like in combination with everything else, really, really good. She's going to be able to see so many cards per turn. It's going to give you a ton of, option advantage, choice advantage, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be really good, and so will all of these cards with her. Then we have the other Mystic cards. Sorcerer Supreme, pretty famous card. Really, really good. Every Mystic ever wants to have it. And there's a new card, Blood Gem, which is very interesting. So Sorcerer Supreme, +1 hand size, always good if you're in hero form. Blood Gem, you have to take 2 damage to generate a resource. Now, people are saying this is too steep of a cost, but if you have a good, supply of healing, that kind of thing, you can kind of translate health when it's not important into a resource when that is what is important for you. So a 0 cost card, very cheap to play, thins your deck, really good, and protects you from things like caught off guard. You can just get rid of your 0 cost card if you like. If you really need that extra resource to play an essential upgrade and control the board, yeah, trade the damage, take the damage, trade away the health, and recover it later. That's fine. And I think is a Mystic thing, kind of, trading health for power is really cool, for a theme. So I like that quite a lot. So just a quick note that while Magik is the first of her kind in Marvel Champions, Fantasy Flight Games' previous games have a character exactly like this. Gandalf in Lord of the Rings and Norman Withers in Arkham Horror. Haven't played a lot of Lord of the Rings, have played a lot of Arkham Horror, and I have played Norman. Very, very fun. Norman specifically also gets to play a card from the top with that -1 discount. So yeah, very similar things going on in Fantasy Flight Games. This is not a unique idea, but I do think Magik is going to be very fun because these characters are very fun. So with Magik, you can play that face-up card on top of your deck, and it's really, really good. She also has these upgrades which run off whatever kind of card is on the top of your deck. You either want, the specific resource or a wild to enable them, or you're in trouble and you don't get the, the stat boost. Her crown is +1 forwarding, soul sword +1 attack, armor +1 defense, and each of them has an interesting keyword like steady, piercing, or retaliate associated as well, which is always, functional regardless of what's on top of your deck. Now, this is really interesting, and I think what most decks will do is they will have one preferred stat boost, and they will be, they'll be focused on that, and they might not even play the other ones, or won't go out of their way if they have multiple good options. And it's interesting to me that the crown costs a little bit more because boosting a 1 to a 2, while it is good, from 1 forwarding to 2 forwarding, I don't know. I think I'd rather take something she's already better at and become even better personally. But, threat removal is more valuable point for point, so we'll see how that plays out. It's very much like heroic intuition with, steady and a chance not to work. But I think these are good. I think you'd really just focus on one, though, is my takeaway from this. Then she has a few other cards. We already talked about scrying a bit, but in combination with these other cards, it becomes really, really useful. Limbo, however, is the card I think she is going to be most desperate for. Limbo just swaps cards about with the top of your deck from your hand, and it doesn't really gain you any bonus, but if you make smart choices to make your hero ability now functional, that is everything. That is so good. So the thing that makes this really good is it works in the villain phase. Limbo has a response that says, after the villain phase begins, exhaust Limbo, swap a card from your hand with the top of your deck. So if you have a defensive event, or maybe something that counts as an encounter card, I think she might come with one. We'll talk about that more soon. If you can get something set up to use in the villain phase, you're getting double the value of your hero ability. If you're only using that in one phase, you're only getting half the benefit per round. So Limbo really helping out put the right card in the right place is phenomenal. It's so, so good. And again, Just being able to use it alternatively as an action on the hero phase to put the right card, that is still going to be useful. This card is a card you will play immediately, no questions asked. And then we have Stepping Disc. Stepping Disc readies your hero. It's one cost, so if it's on top of your deck, it's kind of free. You have your 5 cards in hand still intact, and you ready up, which is really good if you have one of those upgrades like your sword in play, so you've got free attack. But also, you can take a magic card from your discard pile, put it on top of your deck with it, as long as it's not another copy of Stepping Disc, um, which is really, really good. So if you use Stepping Disc to ready up, and you have your Soul Sword in play for a +1 attack, if you have the right icon on top of your deck, you can use Stepping Disc to pick the right icon on one of your cards in the discard pile, put that card on top of your deck, so Soul Sword is now working. I think that kind of thing is going to be really, really useful. Then we have her signature ally, Colossus. Colossus is really, really, really good. So he's like the basic version you can see here, but even better. His attack is a little lower, but half the consequential damage, +1 forwarding, extremely good. Coming with that toughness, just the same. But what makes him really good is his interrupt. When an enemy would attack you, you can play him from your hand and declare him the defender without exhausting him. What this means is he's a lot faster tempo in that regard. Normally with the normal Colossus, you play him. If you want to use that tough card defensively, you have to wait for the villain phase, be attacked, exhaust him to take the attack, then lose it, then wait until the very following round after that to actually have him ready and in a state able to use his attack or whatever. So Colossus here, being able to play him when you're being attacked, not exhausting him, still taking the damage on the tough, immediately on the following phase you can start to use him to attack or thwart or anything you like. That is really good. But what is even better is if he is, perhaps through using Limbo, the card on top of your deck. Because he's an interrupt you can use in the villain phase. So he's going to help you get that double value from your hero ability. So that is just superb. And I think Colossus is going to be played almost every time you see him. You can even use him with Stepping Disc, put him on top of your deck, and that will make things that run off allies, like aspect cards and things that interact with them, really, really consistent. And, it's just very convenient. So we've got things like, to me, my X-Men and Mutant Protectors that are going to benefit from Colossus being, fairly readily available. Now, to me, my X-Men is something you can use on your turn. Search the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally. But if you put Colossus on top of your deck, you're certainly going to be able to find an X-Men ally with 100%, guarantee. The Mutant Protectors is not going to be so good with the Stepping Disc combo, but certainly if Colossus is in your hand, or happens to be the card on top of your deck, it's going to be useful. And he's just a really good ally to use with Mutant Protectors because he is so good. You can also use the training cards with Colossus a lot more consistently because you're going to have that ally available more often than people usually would have an ally available. Now, doesn't quite work so well with Danger Room, although it still will be kind of handy. But nonetheless, all these training cards will be really good in combination on Magik and with Colossus. Even Protective Training, which people don't like as much, he can be boosted to 6 hit points, which means he can defend, and then probably defend a final time, even on a lot of expert scenarios, which is pretty good. Now, I wanted to talk briefly about her missing events. Now, because her Ultra Ego ability references spells, and we've only seen one spell, Scrying, we know there's one copy of it, she's probably going to have a lot more spells, at least 5, I would say. Multiple copies of the same one, obviously, but we've got that to look forward to. Now, the Magic Ally removes minions from play, so I wouldn't be surprised if something she has is, able to do similar. Not quite sure. She uses a mental resource for this ability as an ally. Now, we've looked at her upgrades, which will want specific resources as well. So that's going to be really, really interesting. I'm curious if she'll use more resources in terms of her events and stuff. Now, she might have a lot of attacks or cheap attacks due to coming with an aggression card in her precon called Test of Defense. It might not be. It might just be completely separate. But Test of Defense wants you to play a lot of attack cards. So far, we've only seen one really expensive attack card in her precon. So I think it's likely she might have some cheaper ones in there, or maybe in her hero kit. Could just be a 1-cost spell that she has going around that does damage. And that could be a response to interrupt to make sure she could maybe use it in the the villain phase, to get that double value. Or maybe she's got a defense card that does that, or a card that lets her change form, as I sort of talked about a bit. Anything like that. It could be her version of Armor Up, or it could be an encounter card cancel like every other Mystic has. Now, I did also talk about her, lower forwarding a little bit, just like Colossus. She might not have a forwarding event, but maybe she will. Not quite sure. Most modern characters do, but Colossus did not. And then Most mystics are, support oriented in some way, give out a lot of status cards, or they can heal and so on and so forth, or boost stats like Adam Warlock. She so far doesn't seem to have anything like that, except, basic spell in her precon. But in terms of her hero kit, we haven't seen anything. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that as well. So a few ideas there of what she might have. Not 100% sure of any of them, but I think at least, a few of them we will, be. I'd be surprised if we didn't receive them, I'll put it that way. So let's look at the aspect stuff. Let's look at protection. If we want to make sure we have cards on top of our deck that we can, use in the villain phase, protection is the obvious choice. Loads of defense events, even a couple of attack events here like First Hit and Powerful Punch, even a fording event like True Grit, although I do not think that will be very good for her. I thought it was interesting in terms of an interaction, so I put it here. But yeah, things like Subdue, Sidestep, anything like that. Even if you're going fully defensive, Desperate Defense, never back down, all that good stuff is going to be really, really useful. And with Limbo, you can just swap it there. But if you put in quite a few, you'll probably, you'll have a good chance to find it by accident in the right place. And what's even better is a lot of these cards are all energy resources, which means your mystical armor will have that +1 defense going, more likely. So that's really good. We've also got What Doesn't Kill Me, which is one of my favorite cards in protection, and it's going to be really, really good for her for multiple reasons. So I'm going to come back to this one. Let's first talk about Dauntless. Her mystical armor gives her Retaliate. It's the defense, kind of protection upgrade she has. So getting more Retaliate from Dauntless is good, and kind of in a similar way, she can get some from Electrostatic Armor. Sort of, it's similar to Retaliate. So I think these can be interesting for her. Now, Dauntless wants you to be at full health or have, more health than you started with things like Endurance or even Symbiote Suit. So you want things to be able to keep you healthy, which is where What Doesn't Kill Me comes into play. So you can use that to keep Dauntless online. But one of the problems is if you have managed to stay healthy and your defense worked out, which is probably what you want, What Doesn't Kill Me won't work. If you have not lost any hit points, you cannot play it because you need to heal 2 damage. That is part of the cost of the card. If you do not heal 2 damage, you cannot use it to ready up. However, she comes with a card that lets her take 2 damage in the form of Blood Gem, and based on the rulings we've got, based with Clarity of Purpose and Captain Marvel's healing cost and her hero ability, I do think you can use Blood Gem to pay for What Doesn't Kill Me, even if you're at full health when you start doing that process, and it will all work out fine. So I think those things will work really well. Especially, she can get that Soul Sword stat boost. Just readying up with What Doesn't Kill Me is going to be good, even without the whole kind of Dauntless build. Jocasta, I think, is really good for her, purely, honestly, because Shield Spell is so good. You can use Jocasta to grab Shield Spell, so you kind of get 2 copies per deck pass if they fall, in the right order, which they might not. But I think it will be, fairly good, especially in multiplayer, where you're going to maybe want to defend for more people. You can defend for someone else, then when the attack comes to you, you play Shield Spell. Brother Voodoo is one of those effects which I sort of mentioned earlier. Lets you search your deck, which means you shuffle it afterwards and have something different on top for your ability. But he's just a good character, a good ally to get you, some fording, maybe a block, and maybe, a card in your hand. So big fan of him. And actually, as a mystic, he works with team building exercise. And then we have Justice. And I don't think this has a ton of synergy. The main thing I want to talk about is Wolfsbane. After Wolfsbane Thwart, name a card type, then discard from the top of your deck. If the card you discard is of the named type, you get to draw it. Well, since you can see what's on top of your deck, Wolfsbane has a 100% hit rate here. Feral, kind of similar. You get a benefit for what you kind of discard, but it doesn't really pay off in any kind of major way. But I thought it is interesting. You can kind of see what's you're going to discard before you discard it. And then we've got Float Like a Butterfly, where she has ways to ready, and I think she will like having X-Men allies, and Utopia means playing X-Men allies also readies you. She's going to have a lot of attacks coming from all these different places to get more damage out of Float Like a Butterfly. Then we've got Aggression, which I think is kind of more interesting than Justice, I'll put it that way. You've got all these weapon cards, Fusillade and Mean Swing, which exhaust a weapon to get a benefit. Her Soul Sword gives you the full benefit, whether it's exhausted or, ready. Doesn't matter, what kind of way it's oriented, you are getting that benefit. So those cards become really good with it. If you want another weapon to have, extra chance to make sure you can enable these cards earlier, you can put in Yarnborn, which wants physical resources. Soul Sword wants physical resources. Mean Swing is a physical resource. It all kind of comes together that you can have a lot of physical resources for aggression for damage purposes. What is really, really interesting in aggression is the Hulk ally. Since you can use Limbo to swap what's on top of your deck, or, just maybe see what's on top of your deck and have a lot of physicals in there anyway, Hulk is going to be able to hit, the deal 2 option on his force response almost all the time. That means he is going to be doing 5 damage, basically 5 times, throughout his lifespan, we'll say. So Hulk for a 2-cost card becomes an absolute powerhouse. I think Hulk is going to be in a lot of Magic aggression decks. Dropkick is similar in that it's a physical kind of card, so it will synergize with all these physical kind of cards we've been looking at. However, because it stuns the villain might not attack you, then you might not be able to use certain cards that you can only use in the villain phase. So using this, which is a good card, to stun a villain might stop you getting double value from your hero ability. So we'll have to see kind of what she comes with and how that plays out. But nonetheless, in multiplayer, definitely this will be a very good card for her. Your pay for that is also interesting. This card I'm really looking forward to using on her. I think this is a very underrated card. It's one of aggression's best forwarding options. After you take damage from a villain attack, you get to then remove threat equal to the damage you took. It's the response. You can use this if it's on top of your deck in the villain phase, which is, using Limbo, going to be very possible. And because of your low forwarding, it's just going to be even more valuable than, most other characters. Now, having 10 hit points makes this a little bit kind of sketchy, a little bit risky, but I've played decks built around this on Phoenix before and, absolutely stomped Expert Magneto. So on most difficulties for most villains, this is going to be viable. You will have to be careful. It's not going to be, it'll have a bit more of a skill element and judgment element than a lot of cards, but still very, very viable. And then we've got No Quarter, which I thought was really interesting. So No Quarter needs a physical resource, and we've been talking about physicals a lot. But for every point of excess damage it deals, you get to discard cards, and if one of them is an aggression card, whichever ones are aggression cards, you get to draw. You can swap an aggression card on top of your deck with Limbo, or maybe there's one that you can see anyway. Just makes No Quarter hit, a lot more reliably, which I think is quite fun. Even if it's only that first card, I still think that is pretty good. So let's talk about leadership. So she wants to swap cards on top of her deck for various benefits and reasons. Domino can do that. After you use one of her basic powers, swap a card in your hand with the top of your deck. Seems kind of made to work with her in all honesty. If only she had the X-Men trait, it would be even better. But nonetheless, if you're not going for an X-Men tribal build, Domino is probably going in every leadership deck you have with Magik. Kalu is very interesting. He's kind of like Brother Voodoo. Search the top 5 cards, add an event to your hand if you find one. Then your deck is obviously shuffled, so it can kind of reset what's on top anyway. Just a good card. Also works with team building exercise if you wanted to go that route. Just very, 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 very good ally. Black Panther is very interesting. So if you are running Summoning Spell, which you normally will be, he can actually be put into play by Summoning Spell, and then Summoning Spell will be in your discard pile when you trigger his response, and he can grab hold of it again. So it's just a lot of summoning, all in quick succession, which is very, very good value. So I do like Black Panther quite a lot here. Then we've got Captain Marvel. This is kind of like the No Quarter thing. You can make sure there's an energy on top of your deck before you play her, or get her from core for backup, however you want to do it. So you can make sure she's going to at least hit half of her effect, but probably if you can swap a non-energy for an energy on top of your deck, you're probably going to almost get both, the full benefit, the damage and the stun every single time from Captain Marvel. So really cool stuff here. So I'm a big fan of leadership for her. But we can go into the more traditional X-Men leadership stuff. We can go into Uncanny X-Men, which is already kind of a busted card in my opinion. It's really strong. Probably the strongest team card we have, even better than Mighty Avengers. Now, with Colossus being so good, playable in the villain phase, is just getting him back with Stepping Disc. Uncanny X-Men is just going to be, I think next to Cyclops, she might be the best with it. We'll have to wait and see, but it's certainly going to be very potent. To me, my X-Men we already talked about a bit, but we can combo it with Command Team. Command Team readies an ally. So to me, my X-Men is kind of like Sneak Attack. It puts an X-Men ally into play, but then it will leave play, but it will go into your hand, which is nice and kind of combos with Uncanny X-Men. But because it kind of enters play, then will leave play at the end of the phase, if any hit points you haven't used up on activations are kind of wasted, so Command Team readying those allies is really good. Then we've got Call for Aid. This doesn't really fit into the X-Men stuff, but it discards from the top of your deck, which is very good because at the end of that you'll have a different card on top of your deck for your hero ability, so you can kind of have multiple options. What we haven't talked about yet, which we're about to get into, is little basic cards, and what we have is White Fox and Digging Deep. All these discard effects from the Mystic stuff, various characters and stuff we've talked about so far, will work with Digging Deep and White Fox, which are super strong cards. So Call for Aid will work in terms of giving you another option for your hero ability, but also Digging Deep and White Fox. So let's talk about those basic cards. Let's start with the allies here. So I haven't talked about Cosmo yet. Cosmo is a character, an ally that they nerfed because he was too good with Doctor Strange. So they introduced a new mystic for him to be too good with. Yeah, Cosmo, when he attacks with force, you name a card type, then discard the top card of a player deck, or an encounter deck, but you know what's on top of your deck. So if you get the named card type, he doesn't take consequential damage. So a bit like Wolfsbane in Justice, you're always going to know what to choose and get that benefit. but he's basically just an infinite way to keep cycling the option on top of your deck, uh, which is stupid. So put some upgrades on him, have fun with him, and he'll be there forever. Uh, Cosmo and Magik, very, very good. So they're introducing Legion in Bishop's precon, but Legion is clearly 110% intended for Magik. So Legion, again, wants you to discard from the top of your deck. So by using your kind of, shenanigans as Magik, you know what he's going to be doing, which effect he's going to get, so you can, plan for it. Energy is damage, mental is threat removal, and then physical is healing. If healing is bad if he's already, at full health, so you can make sure you're using him at the right time to get that cool benefit. So that's going to be a really good combo. Hope Summers is a character I should have mentioned for Bishop, and while I remember on this line, even the you'll pay for that card will be good for Bishop as well, because he wants to take damage. I didn't mention it in my video. Things like counter attack as well, maybe even toe to toe to get attacked, be really good for Bishop. But Hope Summers, good for both of these new characters. So with Bishop, you can get supercharged. With Magik, you can get Stepping Disc from her. You can get that superpower from your deck and add it to your hand, which is really, really good. And then we've got Atlas Bear, who I don't think is as good, but it's an interesting interaction, so I wanted to talk about it. She gets to look at the top card of your deck, and if it's the right, if it's an event, you get to damage her and then draw it. You can always make sure it's an event when you choose to do that, so it's kind of going to work out, but it's not the greatest value unless you're boosting her health somehow or in some way, which I don't think you often will be very much, but I thought it was worth talking about. So here we have White Fox and Digging Deep, which go well with almost everything we've talked about. Benja's Mansion, I think I've also mentioned. Just ways to draw cards to change what's on top of your deck is good. Celestial Situation is just a very good card. Also goes by Mutant Protectors, so I really like this for her. And then we have X Gene. Now, we don't know what a lot of her events are, but based on her Alter Ego ability referencing spells and her hero ability giving you a -1 discount, pretty sure they're going to be spells of at least 1 cost. And if they're signature events, you can use X Gene, even if they're spells somehow, to pay for them probably. So I think that's going to be very interesting and probably good for her. So that brings us to my predictions, and there's a question mark here because this is like a very, very rough prediction because most of her signature cards, or at least a great deal of them, we do not know. So I'm guessing she's going to be a bit like Colossus, so I put the forwarding lower. Don't really know what her attack kind of cards are looking like, but she can get up to 3 attack and ready, so I think her damage is going to be at least pretty decent. Against survivability, we're not quite sure. Economy, I almost put it 6 stars. I kind of need to sit in practice how often you can trigger it in the villain phase and hero phase. But honestly, that playing with the top card of your deck face up and -1 is incredibly good. You're going to get to play a lot of cards in some very interesting ways, have a lot of options. And just being a Mystic and a Mutant / X-Men, all those resource generators as well. There's no deck that is not going to have a lot of money to play with. Control, we don't really know. I put it at 2, even though we haven't seen anything at all for it, because Mystics tend to have that. But we will see what happens. I make no promises either way. Speed of setup, I think, will be good for her. I think just because she's a Mystic, spiritual meditation, and the ability to see that extra card on top of your deck, you will go through your deck quickly, and you will be able to, get some really powerful cards, faster than most characters. And I also think because she's probably going to focus on one of her stats, depending on what build you go for, she's not going to want all of her upgrades in play at once most of the time. So you don't need to play all of them. You only need maybe 1 or 2, and you're kind of good to go with what she wants to do, I imagine. Reliability, again, just the spiritual meditation, the mystic advantage, the ability to look at the top card of your deck. You're going to be able to get what you need when you need it. You really, I don't see Magik having bad games. I just don't see it. So card value is a weird one. So I put it at 5, but a lot of her cards, that we have seen so far, of those, I would put maybe around 3 star. But some of them are really good. But what's incredibly good, and I normally include this in card value, is the value of her identity card itself. And her hero ability just blows my mind with its value. Like, if I was rating her identity card alone here, I think that'd easily be, I'd give it a 6 bonus star. Normally I rate out of 5 stars. I imagine most of you guys have seen that before, but if you haven't, that is how this works. So that's kind of how I'm figuring things will kind of play for her. So an awesome member of the community who actually messaged me on Discord called Cydrex, they took my tier list video I did and broke down all the categories to see which ones were most important. And the most important ones that I rated, characters higher based on, tended to be economy, speed of setup, reliability, and card value, which are all the strongest things I'm predicting for Magik so far. So that's looking really good for her. Ease of play is a really difficult one to say. I think you will be able to do well with her with little effort, but I think to play her to her maximum potential would take quite a lot of careful fore and deck building. All those little things I think will be relevant to some degree. So Yeah, I think if you're more of a casual player, you're still going to be able to do quite well with her. If you're an experienced or veteran player, if you're trying to squeeze out every drop of value, get every effective, all the efficiency you possibly can. I still think she's going to be very engaging for you as well and do extremely well. Then we've got variety, and I put this at 2. Might drop down to 1. It might move up to 3 or 4. But unfortunately, Mystics want a lot of really good Mystic specific cards. Mutant and X-Men tend to have a lot of really good cards for them as well. And then with the stuff on the top of the deck as well, there's certain things that interact with that. I really think she's going to have a lot of cards that stand out as cards you should be using on her. And it's going to take up almost all of your deck space, if not all of it. And yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of variety in terms of deck builds. Now, in terms of the hero herself compared to other heroes, I think she's extremely unique. Okay, Domino having just been, kind of released in the previous box, maybe they're going to hit some of the same things playing with the top of the deck, but I think they do it very differently. I think most people will find the Magic, quite refreshing and really fun. Fun factor I won't predict specifically because I haven't played the character yet. It doesn't feel really right to do that. Honestly, I don't feel very good about predicting any of these things with her, just because of how many of her, other cards, in her signature kit we have missing. But I do think she looks really fun, and I am excited to play her. So that brings us to the final part of the video. How do I rank her in terms of strength? Well, I haven't played her, and like half of her cards are missing. So this is where you need to take that big pinch of salt, and this is more of a thing for fun, for discussion. But I'm going to say maybe, just maybe, she's S tier. Now, Mystics have a pretty good track record at scoring high. X-Men are pretty strong as well, if I'm honest, and her hero ability looks really strong. And what I've realized for Domino, who I still think is really strong, but she didn't land as high as I expected, is Domino needs quite a bit of setup to do Domino shenanigans. She wants to pip the pug, or her other support. She might need her guns out and then sharpshooter, and then she's got crazy damage. But just one gun out, still good, but it's nothing insane. Whereas I think Magik doesn't need a ton to get going. I think Limbo will be a significant bonus, but I still think she's going to be very strong without Limbo. So yeah, this is kind of my prediction. I think somewhere toward the middle to top end of S tier, could be even higher. In all honesty, I don't really know what she's going with, um, but she could also be A tier. I will say, even though this is quite a rough prediction, pinch of salt, I would be extraordinarily surprised if she was, you know, in B tier. And this is just my tier list; these aren't like official tiers anyway. But for me, I struggle to imagine a world where she is not subtly at least in the middle of A tier. So looking really strong here. Not sure if she will be S tier. I think it's likely, but also working on limited information. So that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more, make sure you cast a spell on that subscribe button. Next up, I'm going to be talking about some of the aspect stuff that came with the In the Age of Apocalypse preview, and yeah, after that, we're going to have the pool aspect pretty soon. So I'm really, really, really excited. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye.